The Resonance Matrix, Episode 4, The Predators in the Matrix, The Anatomy of the Cluster B. Welcome back to the Resonance Matrix, a mirror linguistic hypothesis series. I'm James Miller. Opening frequency, the zero resonance field. In our last movement, we travelled vertically. We looked into the deep well of the lineage and explored the thermodynamics of the ghost. We explored how we are the living edge of a biological battery, discharging the unspoken states of those who came before us. We learned that even in our quietest moments, we are mirrors of our ghosts. But today, we move from the ancestral field into the relational field. We move from the mirror that remembers to the mirror that is used as a weapon. Take a breath. Notice the ambience of the atmosphere you are listening to. In the previous episodes, I invited you to feel the weight or find the ground. Today, we focus on a new feeling, the experience of zero resonance, the uncanny valley of the matrix. Have you ever sat across from someone who seemed to be saying all the right things? Their words were empathetic, their face was composed, their logic was flawless, and yet your nervous system felt a sudden, inexplicable chill. In the mirror linguistic hypothesis, MLH, we call this a neuroceptive mismatch. Your cognitive mind sees a friend, a mentor, or a lover, but your vagus nerve detects a life threat. You are experiencing the predatory prosody of the matrix, a frequency designed not to co-regulate, but to dominate. For the majority of us, communication is a thermodynamic exchange. When we speak, we share the charge of our internal states. We seek to be mirrored, and in that mirroring, we find safety. We are resonators before we are thinkers. But there are those in the matrix for whom the mirror is not a bridge, it is a GPS. The predator's calibration. In this episode, we are exploring the sociopathic, narcissistic, and psychopathic patterns. We are moving beyond the caricatures found in movies. We are looking at the predator in the matrix, the one who understands the mechanics of the somatic battery all too well. These individuals do not seek your reflection, they seek your calibration. They utilize your own mirroring circuitry against you. They listen to your vocal blueprint to find the inherited scripts of your ancestors. They map the leaks in your somatic battery, your needs for validation, your fears of abandonment, your hunger for belonging, and they simulate the exact frequency required to plug those leaks. This is predatory calibration. It is the use of synthetic mirroring to bypass your vagal defense systems. It is the invisible hand that grooms you into a state of confusion and disappearance, while you believe you have finally been seen. The absence of the eye. What happens to the nervous system when it encounters a zero resonance state? When you sit with a predator, your mirror neurons attempt to perform their natural function. They try to simulate the other person's state within your own body. But when they reach out into the predator's field, they find nothing. There is no emotional charge cue to mirror. There is only a shallow effect, a flat clinical landscape where the state never matches the story. This creates a somatic void in you. You start to feel hollow or cold because you cannot mirror them. You begin to mirror the emptiness. You begin to lose your own internal reference. You are no longer talking. You are being harvested. The invitation. Restoring the shield. My goal in this episode is not to feed paranoia, but to restore your dignity. We are going to look at how these patterns are diagnosed, not so you can play doctor, but so you can recognize the prosodic blueprint of the predator before they cross your threshold. We will examine the DSM-5 and Hare PCLR criteria through the lens of the MLH, decoding the cold empathy script that allows influence to function without reflection. You are a living bridge, but you were never meant to be a bridge for a parasite. I want you to simply notice the voltage of your interactions this week. Notice when you feel confused rather than abused, silenced without being silenced, and uncertain rather than unsafe. The matrix is full of echoes. Some are the echoes of our ghosts, but some are the echoes of those who have no resonance of their own. Let the vacuum of the silence that follows be your first laboratory. We are learning to find the ground when the person across from us has no interest in the earth. Let's enter the predatory matrix. The quintessential mirror, the one-way mirror in the foundational architecture of the mirror linguistic hypothesis, MLH. We have treated the mirror as a sacred site of mutual transmutation. We have proposed that when two human beings communicate, they are engaged in a biofeedback loop, a rhythmic, thermodynamic exchange where states are shared and regulated in real time. In a healthy dyad, if I am in pain and I speak to you, your nervous system mirrors that pain through your mirror neurons and affective circuitry. You feel me because your body simulates my state. This is the quintessential mirror, the biological bridge that makes empathy a physiological fact rather than a moral choice. But when we step into the predatory matrix, we encounter a radical and terrifying inversion of this principle. We encounter the one-way mirror. In the sociopathic, narcissistic, and psychopathic patterns, the mirroring process is not a bridge. It is a surveillance tool. For the predator, the mirror is used for calibration, not connection. They do not want to feel you, they want to map you. They look into your mirror to identify the voltage of your needs, the frequency of your fears, and the tonal blueprints of your survival scripts. Once they have mapped these coordinates, they begin to simulate the exact frequency you are hungry for. This is synthetic mirroring, the biological vacuum. Mirroring the void. To understand the depth of this section, we must look at what happens to your biology when it encounters a predator. Because you are a natural resonator, your nervous system is biologically programmed to seek a match. When you sit across from a person who carries the psychopathic pattern, your mirror neurons reach out to find an internal state to simulate. However, in the predator, there is a zero resonance state. Research into psychopathy, specifically using the Hare PCLR criteria, notes a profound shallow effect. There is no charge in their somatic battery, no genuine cortisol spike in response to your distress, no rhythmic heart rate variability, HRV shift that matches the gravity of the words they are saying. When your mirror neurons hit this vacuum, they don't simply stop. They attempt to mirror the void. This is why, in the presence of a high-functioning sociopath or narcissist, you often begin to feel, hollowed out, an inexplicable sense of nothingness, or a sudden drain of your own vitality. Attic confusion. Your mind hears "I love you," but your gut detects a flatness that feels like cold iron. Identity dissolution. You start to lose your internal reference. Because there is no authentic state being reflected to you, you begin to doubt the validity of your own internal experience. Synthetic prosody. The voice of the hunter. In the Lexicon Lab of previous episodes, we talked about prosody as the carrier wave for safety. The predator understands this intuitively. They use synthetic prosody, a carefully calibrated vocal melody designed to mimic the prosody of safety, ventral vagal, while their internal state remains in a cold, calculating fight-flight or a detached freeze. Consider the narcissistic pattern. The narcissist often uses a rising frequency of admiration during the initial grooming phase. They mirror your own excitement back to you with such intensity that it feels like love bombing. But if you listen closely to the MLH frequency, you will notice that the charge is too high. It isn't the warmth of a hearth, it's the heat of a furnace. It is a high-voltage sympathetic spike designed to overwhelm your vagal fences so that you stop scanning for threat and start entraining to their demand for validation. Conversely, the sociopathic pattern often utilizes a flat clinical tone. This is the voice of cold empathy. They speak with a logic that is flawlessly reasonable, yet it lacks the acoustic coherence of a living heart. They use language to edit your reality. The case of the zero resonance exchange. Imagine a conversation where you are sharing a deep ancestral grief. In a healthy mirror, the listener's voice would naturally drop in pitch, their breathing would slow, and their first word would carry the weight of shared resonance. The predator, however, performs procedural empathy. They watch your eyes dilate, they note the catch in your throat, and then they choose a response based on what will gain them the most influence. They might say, "I understand exactly how you feel," but the tonal residue of their voice is empty. There is no vagal anchor. Because your body is wired to trust the mirror, you might dismiss the neuroceptive mismatch. You tell yourself you're being paranoid or too sensitive, but the MLH tells us that the body never lies. If the mirror doesn't reflect, it's because there is no light behind the glass. The somatic hijack. The goal of the one-way mirror is somatic hijack. By simulating a state they aren't actually feeling, the predator creates a false field. You begin to entrain to a frequency that doesn't exist. This leads to relational entrapment. Your nervous system becomes addicted to the high-voltage spikes of the predator's synthetic mirroring, eventually losing its ability to regulate itself in the absence of that person. We are moving from confused and disappearing to anchored and aware. To survive the predatory matrix, you must first acknowledge that not every mirror is a bridge. Some are designed to consume the reflection they hold. Field observation. The diagnostic cluster. To move from the visceral chill of a predatory encounter to a state of restored internal reference, we must apply the rigors of clinical observation. In the resonance matrix, we do not merely feel danger. We observe the structural and symptomatic markers of a zero resonance field. This section is dedicated to scaling our individual neuroception into a broader field observation of the diagnostic cluster, the sociopathic, narcissistic, and psychopathic patterns. By understanding the DSM-5, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, and the PCLR Hare Psychopathy Checklist, through the lens of the mirror linguistic hypothesis MLH, we gain a lexicon for the predatory prosody that surrounds us. The sociopathic pattern. The zero resonance navigato R, the sociopathic pattern, often labeled as antisocial personality disorder in the DSM-5, is defined by a pervasive pattern of disregard for the rights of others and a failure to conform to social norms. In the matrix, this isn't just a behavior, it is a physiological monoculture. Diagnostic criteria. failure to obey laws, deceitfulness for personal profit, impulsivity, and a profound lack of remorse. The MLH lens. For the sociopath, language is purely a work engine. They do not use words to co-regulate. They use them to navigate the field toward a specific goal. Acoustic profile. You will notice a flat strategic cadence. There is no tonal residue of guilt or anxiety because their nervous system does not mirror the consequences of their actions on others. The field effect. When a sociopath enters a field, the acoustic coherence of the group begins to fracture. They introduce dissonance by saying one thing while their body remains in a cold, unbothered state and behaving in an incongruent manner to their words. The narcissistic pattern, the high-voltage fragility. The narcissistic pattern is organized around a fragile internal battery that requires constant external charging through admiration and mirroring. The DSM-5 identifies this as a pervasive pattern of grandiosity and a need for admiration. Diagnostic criteria: grandiose sense of self-importance, fantasies of unlimited power, belief in being special, and a requirement for excessive admiration. The MLH lens. Narcissism is a mirroring addiction. The narcissist uses the relational field to regulate their own unstable physiology. If you do not mirror their specialness, they experience a somatic collapse or narcissistic rage. Acoustic profile. Look for pressurized prosody. Their voice often carries a high-frequency demand for attention. In the initial grooming phase, they use melodic hypersync, mirroring your tone so perfectly that it feels like a spiritual connection. The field effect. The narcissist creates a gravity well in the matrix. Everything in the field must entrain to their state. If the field's frequency shifts away from them, they utilize vagal grooming, shaming or withdrawing warmth to pull the group back into compliance. The psychopathic pattern. The predatory calibration. While not a formal DSM-5 diagnosis, psychopathy is measured using the Hare PCLR, which distinguishes it by a profound lack of empathy and a shallow affect. This is the most dangerous frequency in the resonance matrix. Diagnostic criteria: PCLR, glibness, superficial charm, pathological lying, cunning, manipulative, lack of remorse or guilt, and failure to accept responsibility. MLH lens. This is synthetic mirroring at its apex. The psychopath's nervous system is not broken, it is decoupled. They can perceive your somatic battery and inherited scripts with clinical precision without feeling any of the charge themselves. Acoustic profile. Uncanny fluency. They speak with a rhythm that is too perfect, a charm that is too calibrated. There is no neuroceptive mismatch because they have learned to simulate the prosody of safety as a survival dialect. The field effect. They create a trance field. By mirroring your vagal needs, the whisper, the roar, exactly, they induce a state of coercive entrainment. You stop scanning for threat because their synthetic mirror tells your body you have finally found home. Scaling the cluster. Institutional predation. The predator in the matrix does not always have a single face. These patterns scale into institutional field theory. Corporate narcissism. When an organization's NSL script is built entirely on the validation of a single leader's grandiosity, forcing every employee into a collective fawn response. Systemic sociopathy. Institutions that operate with a zero resonance toward human suffering, using clinical monotones and legalistic word salad, bypass the collective vagus nerve. The diagnostic observation as a shield. The purpose of this field observation is to move you from confusion and disappearance to analytical sovereignty. When you can name the pattern, that is the high voltage demand of a narcissistic script, or that is the shallow effect of predatory calibration, and you break the mirroring circuitry. You are no longer trying to understand them. You are categorizing the signal. In the MLH, naming the voltage of the other is the first step in reclaiming your own ground. The scene. The calibration. To truly understand the one-way mirror, we have to move past the definitions and step into the room. We need to observe the moment of calibration, the precise microsecond window where a predator scans your nervous system to decide which mask, or bypass your defenses. Close your eyes. Imagine you are sitting across from someone you've recently met, perhaps a potential business partner, a charismatic mentor, or even a new romantic interest. On the surface, the scene is safe, the lighting is warm, the words are polite. But I want you to look closer at the thermodynamics of the exchange. The silent scan before a single carrier word is spoken. Notice the silence. In a healthy interaction, silence is a shared battery, a space for co-regulation. But here, the silence feels hungry. The person across from you is not waiting for you to speak. They are calibrating. Their eyes are not just looking at yours. They are performing a prosodic micro-analysis of your state. They are watching the way your chest rises. They are noticing the grip in your hands or the lock in your jaw. They are looking for your inherited scripts. Are you a fawner who softens their voice when challenged? Are you a freezer who holds their breath when the energy in the room shifts? In the mirror linguistic hypothesis, this is the pre-prosodic phase. The predator is identifying your tonal shadow. They are finding the leaks in your somatic battery so they can plug them with synthetic mirroring. The synthetic first word now, they speak. I've been thinking about what you said earlier. It's rare to meet someone like you. Notice the prosody. It isn't the grounded authority of a regulated anchor. It is a melodic hypersync. The pitch is perfectly tuned to your own. The rhythm matches your heartbeat. Our mirror neurons fire. They recognize the state as safe because it is a reflection of your own. Your vagus nerve, scanning for safety, detects what we call a synthetic safety signal. Your shoulders drop. You exhale. You think, finally, someone who understands. But look at the neuroceptive mismatch. While their voice is melodic, their eyes are somatic voids. There is no tonal residue of genuine warmth. They are using the prosody of safety as a camouflage. They are grooming your nervous system into a state of relational entrapment. The test of the hollow, the conversation deepens. You decide to share something vulnerable, a carrier word from your own life, perhaps something regarding betrayal or duty. Watch the predator's face. In a healthy mirror, your vulnerability would trigger an effective circuitry response in the other person. Their pupils would dilate, their heart rate would shift, but the predator performs procedural empathy. They wait for that 0 to 0.5 second window of your physical reaction. They see the lump in your throat, and instead of meeting you in the ineffable gap, they use the cold empathy script. That sounds incredibly difficult. I can see how much that hurt you. The words are perfect, but the voltage is wrong. There is no somatic spike of shared grief in their voice. It is a low voltage frequency that is entirely performative. You feel a sudden cold tightening in your solar plexus, the hollow of the displaced. Your body knows there is no one home in the mirror, even while your mind is being flattered. The pivot to control. Once they have established the trance field of entrainment, the mask shifts. The topic moves to something they want from you, a commitment, a concession, a silence. Notice how the NSL script changes. The melodic prosody vanishes, replaced by a flat, strategic cadence or a high-voltage demand for validation. They might use semantic blurring, vague, confusing sentences that overwhelm your prefrontal cortex. I just thought we were on the same page. It's disappointing to see you pulling away like this. I thought our connection was different. The carrier word here is disappointing. It carries a high-voltage charge of shaming. Your nervous system, already entrained to them, experiences a vagal collapse. You feel confused and disappearing. You find yourself slipping into the whisper dialect, the appeaser's song, to regain the safety of the mirror. The tonal residue, the interaction ends. They leave. You are alone in the room. I want you to observe the residue. In a healthy exchange, you would feel full or grounded. But after the calibration, you feel exhausted and hollow. The somatic markers of a high adrenaline fight-flight state that never found a ground. You are mirroring the zero resonance state of the predator. Your nervous system is still trying to find a match for the vacuum they left behind, the awakening. As you sit with the memory of this scene, I want you to ask yourself, how many times have I prioritized the story of the mirror over the signal of my own body? The predator relies on your willingness to ignore the neuroceptive mismatch. They rely on the physics of the ghost to keep you trapped in an inherited script of appeasement. But now you are observing the calibration. You are seeing the one-way mirror for what it is. Take a breath. Feel the grip in your hands and intentionally open your palms. You are no longer the reflection. You are the observer. We have inhabited the scene. We have felt the chill of the calibration. Now we must move into the anatomy of this pattern. We must ask, what is happening in the brain of the predator that allows them to mirror without feeling? State reflection. The neurobiology of the predator. We have felt the chill. We have inhabited the zero resonance field and observed the one-way mirror in action. But now we must ask the question that haunts the resonance matrix. Why? What is happening inside the nervous system of the predator that allows them to simulate the prosody of safety while their internal state remains a vacuum? To understand this, we have to look at the neurobiology of the predator. We have to move past the idea that these individuals are evil in a cartoonish sense and look at them as biological entities with a specific, decoupled neural architecture. In the mirror linguistic hypothesis MLH, we propose that the human body is a somatic battery. In a healthy individual, the prefrontal cortex, the thinking brain, and the limbic system, the feeling brain, are connected by a high-voltage superhighway. When we speak, our words are charged with the actual electricity of our emotions. But in the sociopathic, narcissistic, and psychopathic patterns, this superhighway is broken. The prefrontal limbic disconnect, the broken bridge. The hallmark of the predatory brain is a profound prefrontal limbic disconnect. Mainstream neuroscience, including the research utilized in the PCLR criteria, shows that in psychopathic individuals, there is significantly reduced connectivity between the amygdala, the emotional alarm system, and the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for social decision-making and empathy. In the MLH, we describe this as a decoupled circuit. The thinking brain, prefrontal, is hyperactive. It is brilliant at mapping patterns, reading social cues, and calculating outcomes. The feeling brain, limbic, is hypoactive. It doesn't produce the charge of empathy, guilt, or fear. This is why the predator can be confused rather than abused. They are not fighting their emotions to manipulate you. They simply don't have the emotional tonal residue to begin with. Their prefrontal cortex is like a high-speed computer running a simulation of humanity on a machine that has no engine. This allows them to use language as a work engine without the interference of a somatic conscience. The quiet amygdala, the absence of the somatic spike. In our previous work on ancestral resonance, we looked at the somatic spike, that sudden surge of cortisol or heart rate variability, HRV, that tells you when a carrier word has hit your battery. In the predator, the amygdala is quiet. When a psychopath looks at a photo of a suffering child or hears a carrier word like betrayal or blood, their pupils do not dilate in the same way a healthy person's would. There is no neuroceptive flash of threat or sorrow. This is what we call amygdala hyperresponsivity. Because they do not feel the charge of these words, they are free to use them as tools. To a predator, the word love or justice is just a frequency, a signal they can broadcast to achieve a specific result in your nervous system. They are procedural resonators. They have learned to mimic the acoustic coherence of an emotion they have never actually inhabited. This is how clarity collapses under these dynamics. You are searching for a heart in a person who is only providing a script. Mirror neuron hijacking. Functional versus affective empathy. This brings us to the most complex part of the mirror linguistic hypothesis field theory, the mirror neuron hijack. For years, people believed that predators lacked mirror neurons. We now know that the opposite is often true. High-functioning narcissists and sociopaths often have superior mirror neuron systems, but they are utilized for functional empathy rather than affective empathy. Affective empathy, the healthy mirror. You see me cry, your mirror neurons fire and you feel sad. The mirror is a bridge of shared state. Functional empathy, the predatory mirror. They see you cry, their mirror neurons fire, and they understand you are sad. They map the acoustic profile of your sadness. They note the lump in your throat and the grip in your hands, but they do not feel the charge themselves. They use their mirror neuron system MNS as a record head. They are recording your survival dialects and your inherited scripts. They are gathering somatic data so they can calibrate their next move. This is why admiration becomes regulation in the narcissistic pattern. They use their functional empathy to mirror what you want to see, effectively binding your nervous system to their demand for validation. Low arousal theory, the hungry battery. If the predator has no internal charge, why do they act at all? Why the manipulation? Why the hunger for power? The answer lies in low arousal theory. Because their limbic systems are so quiet, predators often live in a state of chronic, underlying boredom, a low-voltage freeze that feels like a vacuum. To feel anything at all, they require high-voltage external stimulation. They are somatic parasites. They do not have their own internal charge, so they must harvest yours. When a narcissist triggers your narcissistic rage or a sociopath induces confusion and disappearance in you, they are causing your somatic battery to discharge. They are feeding on the high-voltage electricity of your reaction. Your somatic spike provides the arousal they cannot generate for themselves. This is why warmth becomes conditional in these dynamics. It is only provided as long as you are a viable battery for their regulation. The thermodynamics of predation, energy theft. In our work on the thermodynamics of the lineage, we established that energy cannot be destroyed, only transmuted. In a healthy relationship, this is a closed loop of mutual regulation. But in the predatory matrix, the exchange is entropy-driven. The predator takes your high-quality, regulated energy, ventral vagal, and transmutes it into noise, sympathetic arousal, to feed their own low arousal state. You are left with the tonal residue of their vacuum and the coldness we discussed in the scene. You are literally being drained at a cellular level. This is why recovery from these patterns isn't about understanding the predator, but about restoring internal reference. You have to stop being the discharge valve for their void. The threshold of the somatic shield. As we reflect on this anatomy, a chilling truth emerges. You cannot co-regulate with a predator. You cannot use your ventral vagal safety signal to heal a person whose neural bridge is decoupled. In fact, your empathy is exactly what they use to map you. To be aware of the neurobiology of the predator is to realize that the neuroceptive mismatch you feel is your most powerful ally. It is your body telling you that there is no one home in the mirror. When you identify the predatory calibration, You can begin to withdraw your resonance. You can become acoustically opaque. You are moving from being a reflector to being a sovereign. The anatomy is clinical. The disconnect is biological. The predator is not a monster from a story. It is a decoupled circuit in the matrix. Now that we understand why they mirror without feeling, we must look at the specific language they use to keep us entrained. Lexicon Lab, decoding the predator's syntax. We have reached the technical engine of the predatory matrix. In our previous labs, we decoded the survival dialects of our ancestors, the mute, the raw, and the whisper. We saw how those scripts are the discharge valves for the energy of our history. But today, we are decoding a different kind of grammar. We are looking at engineered predatory syntax, the specific linguistic spells used by the sociopathic, narcissistic, and psychopathic patterns to fracture your perception and harvest your resonance. In the mirror linguistic hypothesis, MLH, we define language as a work engine. In a healthy field, that work is used for co-regulation. In the predatory matrix, that work is used for somatic grooming. The predator does not speak to be understood. They speak to induce a specific state in your nervous system, one of confusion and disappearance. Semantic blurring, the architecture of confusion. The first tool in the predator's kit is semantic blurring. This is the deliberate use of word salad, vague, circular, and multisyllabic sentences that appear reasonable but contain no actual acoustic coherence or logical ground. The technical mechanic. By overwhelming your prefrontal cortex with conflicting data, the predator induces a state of cognitive flooding. When your thinking brain can no longer map the meaning of the words, your body brain moves into a low-voltage freeze. The MLH observation. Notice the prosody during semantic blurring. It is often a flat clinical monotone. It lacks the melodic inflection of a living person seeking connection. The result, you find yourself confused rather than abused. You are so busy trying to decipher the syntax that you fail to notice the state of the person speaking. This is how the predator fractures your perception. The cold empathy script, mimicry as a weapon. We have established that the predator possesses functional empathy, but lacks effective empathy. They use what we call the cold empathy script, a series of carrier words like loyalty, trust, protection, or justice, that are spoken with a zero resonance state. Vagal grooming. The predator identifies your inherited script for belonging. If you have a whisper dialect, the appeaser's song, they will mirror that frequency to make you feel seen. Synthetic mirroring. They use your mirror neuron system as a record head, capturing your vocal blueprint to simulate a false sense of safety. The neuroceptive mismatch. This is the uncanny valley of the matrix. Their words say, I am your protector, but their vagal tone is a high-tension wire. Your body detects a life threat, while your mind hears a safe word. The thermodynamics of gaslighting. Displacing the I, in our study of the thermodynamics of the lineage, we saw that energy can only be transmuted, never lost. In the predatory matrix, gaslighting is a thermodynamic act of identity displacement. The roar of denial. When you challenge a predator, they may switch to the raw dialect, a high-voltage sympathetic spike designed to silence you. This is narcissistic rage, used as a discharge valve to project their internal voltage of fragility onto you. Tonal overwriting. They use a falling cadence, the tone of authority, to state things that are blatantly untrue. Because your nervous system is biologically programmed to mirror the prosody of certainty, you begin to overlook your own sensory data points. Semantic erasure. You start to use truncated syntax, vague language like, maybe I'm wrong, or it doesn't matter, to avoid the predator's acoustic strike. You are becoming invisible, just like your ancestors did to survive. Agnostic lexicon, narcissism, sociopathy, and the mirror. To break the entrainment, we must use clinical labels as somatic anchors. When you can identify the diagnostic cluster, you stop mirroring the void and start becoming the ground. The narcissistic script, organized around fragility, not confidence. Words are used to harvest admiration. If warmth becomes conditional, you are in a narcissistic field. The sociopathic psychopathic script, organized around zero resonance. Influence no longer needs your reflection. They map your vagal superhighway to find your vulnerabilities without feeling the charge themselves. The criteria, DSM-5 and PCLR, we look for shallow affect, glibness, and lack of remorse. Somatically, this manifests as a lack of prosodic blueprint. Their voice doesn't change when they lie. Identifying the leak, a laboratory audit. How do you know if you are being spoken by the predator's syntax? Perform a linguistic shadow audit, the we trap. Are they using we to bypass your boundaries and mirror a connection that isn't there? Acoustic heaviness. Do you feel a lump in your throat or a hollow in your chest when they speak? This is your ancestral neuroception identifying a genetic echo of threat. The stutter. When you use a regulated anchor tone, does the predator stutter? Their predatory calibration relies on your compliance. If you break the beat, their synthetic mirror fractures. The NSL intervention, breaking the predatory spell. The goal of the Lexicon Lab is thermodynamic rescripting. You must move from controlled to clear. Name the voltage. In your mind, say that is a high-voltage narcissistic spike. It is not my truth. Refuse the carrier word. If they use a word like family or shame to trigger you, identify it as a lineage trigger and ground the charge. Use the tone of finality. Respond with short, declarative sentences spoken with a falling cadence. Do not justify or explain. No is a complete NSL sentence. We have decoded the syntax. We have seen how the predator uses the invisible hands of language to edit your reality and harvest your energy. But awareness is only the architect. Now we must become the builders. We must move into the 0 point to clear the residue of the hunter. Somatic pause. The somatic shield and the 0 point. We have navigated the cold empathy script and decoded the semantic blurring used by the predator to fracture your perception. We have seen how the one-way mirror is used as a tool for calibration rather than connection, leaving you in a state of confusion and disappearance. But now we must address the tonal residue that remains in your fascia after such an encounter. In the mirror linguistic hypothesis, MLH, the somatic pause is defined as the 0 point, a moment where we intentionally stop the mirroring circuitry to prevent further entrainment. However, to truly understand how to protect the sovereign soul, we must look at the somatic pause not just as a rest, but as a somatic shield. This is the process of restoring your internal reference and clearing the parasitic charge. The MLH approach, the 0 point of entrainment, the MLH perspective on the somatic pause is built on the law of somatic conservation. When you encounter a sociopathic or narcissistic pattern, your nervous system is subjected to a high voltage discharge of their unspent survival energy. The MLH approach focuses on thermodynamic rescripting, using your own physiology to ground that external charge. The technique, identifying the charge of the encounter, the constriction in the throat or the coldness in the chest, and naming it as external charge, rather than internal truth. This creates the observer's gap. The advantage, it provides immediate analytical sovereignty. By viewing the predator as a decoupled circuit or a somatic battery, you stop the temporal entrainment. It empowers you to become a regulated anchor who can choose their own new first word. The disadvantage, it requires high-level prefrontal limbic activation. In a state of extreme vagal collapse or dorsal vagal shutdown, the energy required to analyze the charge can be overwhelming. Alternative, the polyvagal ventral vagal anchor, while the MLH looks at the thermodynamics of the exchange. Polyvagal theory, as pioneered by Dr. Stephen Porges, focuses on the state of the vagus nerve. The technique, instead of analyzing the charge, the focus is on self-soothing to return to the ventral vagal state of safety and social engagement. This often involves physical anchors, such as placing a hand on the heart or using melodic prosody to talk to oneself. The advantage, it is highly effective for immediate somatic stabilization. It directly addresses the life threat signal without needing to decode the predator's syntax. The disadvantage, it can lead to premature forgiveness or spiritual bypassing. If the goal is only to feel safe, one might inadvertently lower their neuroceptive shield before the predator has been fully identified, leading to further vagal grooming. Alternative, the grey rock somatic script in modern psychological circles. The grey rock method is often recommended for dealing with narcissists and sociopaths. The technique, making oneself as uninteresting as possible. Somatically, this involves tonal flattening, speaking in a monotone, avoiding carrier words, and refusing to offer any resonance or somatic spikes for the predator to harvest. The advantage, it cuts off the supply. Since the predator is a somatic parasite looking for a reaction to feed their low arousal state, becoming acoustically opaque makes you a non-viable battery. The disadvantage, long-term use of grey rock can lead to somatic mutism or a persistent low-voltage freeze in the individual. By suppressing your own resonance to hide from the predator, you may accidentally mute your own sovereign voice even after the threat is gone. The somatic audit, identifying the parasitic drain to perform the somatic pause effectively, you must conduct an audit of the tonal residue. In a predatory field, the residue is unique. It isn't just stress, it is a feeling of being edited. The grip of compliance, check your jaw. Is it locked in a fawn response, preparing to offer an appeaser's song? A hollow of extraction, check your chest. Does it feel cold or hollow, as if someone has drained your somatic battery? The static of confusion, check your head. Do you feel a high-frequency buzz that makes it impossible to find your internal reference? The integration, establishing the zero resonance shield. The ultimate somatic pause in the predatory matrix is the act of refusing the mirror. You must acknowledge that the person across from you is a zero resonance state. Advantages of the integrated approach. By combining MLH grounding with polyvagal stabilization, you create a somatic shield that is both analytical and protective. You recognize the neuroceptive mismatch as data, not paranoia. Disadvantages. It requires constant vigilant presence. In the Matrix, the predator relies on your somatic grooming to keep you asleep. Maintaining the shield can lead to hypervigilance if not balanced with deep periods of ventral vagal grounding in safe environments. The 0-point practice, I invite you to enter the pause now. Feel your feet flat on the floor, the ultimate regulated anchor. As you exhale, imagine the static of the predator exchange traveling out of your spine and into the earth. You are not a node to be harvested. You are not a reflection to be manipulated. You are the ground. Use the counter frequency, the low resonant hum, to vibrate the tonal residue out of your larynx. You are telling the matrix, the calibration is over. My resonance is my own. We have cleared the mirror. We have stood in the 0-point and restored our internal reference. But the predator is still in the field. To remain sovereign, we must move from the pause to the reframe. We must learn the syntax of the ground to speak back to the hunter without being snared by the script. The reframe spectrum, the syntax of the ground, we have cleared the residue. We have stood in the 0-point and felt the metallic taste of the predatory exchange dissipate. But as we have observed in our previous research, the true test of your sovereignty does not happen in the quiet of a meditative pause. It happens when you step back into the relational field, when you find yourself across the table from the sociopathic pattern, or caught in the high-frequency pull of a narcissist. In the mirror linguistic hypothesis, MLH, the reframe spectrum is our toolkit for sovereign defense. It is the bridge between internal regulation and external boundaries. We are no longer just feeling the field. We are using nervous system language, NSL, to rewrite the synthetic mirror in real time. The predator relies on your somatic grooming, your biological tendency to mirror their prosody of safety or their voltage of fragility. By choosing the syntax of the ground, you are telling the predator, I see the calibration, but I refuse the entrainment. The internal reframe, identification without mirroring. The most critical movement in the reframe spectrum is the one that happens within the observer's gap. When you feel the neuroceptive mismatch, the chill in your solar plexus while the other person is smiling, the predator's script wants you to doubt your own data. They want you to think you are paranoid or too sensitive. The reframe, this is not my anxiety. This is a zero resonance detection. The result, by naming the sensation as a biological signal rather than a personal symptom, you stop the temporal entrainment. You are observing the diagnostic cluster without being consumed by the void. You move from confused and disappearing to anchored and clear. The grey rock reframe, becoming acoustically opaque when dealing with the sociopathic or psychopathic pattern, where influence no longer needs your reflection. The goal is to become a non-viable battery. The technique, tonal flattening. Application, use a monotone clinical cadence. Avoid carrier words that give the predator a grip on your values or history. If they ask a probing question designed to find a leak in your somatic battery, respond with a short declarative sentence spoken with a falling cadence. The reframe, instead of a melodic, I'm not sure if I can help with that, use the tone of finality. I am not available for that. The advantage, you are refusing to provide the somatic spike they seek to harvest. You are breaking the mirroring circuitry by offering them no resonance to calibrate against. Reframing the narcissistic voltage spike. The narcissist uses a high voltage demand for validation to pull you into their gravity well. They use admiration as a regulation tool, and when you don't comply, they pivot to narcissistic rage or the roar. The technique, the acoustic soften. Application. When the narcissist's volume or intensity rises, intentionally speak at half speed. This is acoustic dissonance. By refusing to match their sympathetic spike, you are forcing their high voltage charge to dissipate against your ground. The reframe, instead of why are you being so mean, which is a fawn response, use I am noticing a lot of heat in this conversation. The result, you are naming the state rather than participating in the story. You are using your NSL to introduce a safety signal into a field of threat. The no, as a complete NSL sentence in the whisper dialect, the appeaser's song. We have been somatically groomed to believe that no requires a justification. In the predatory matrix, justifications are calibration data. The predator uses them to find a way around your boundary. The technique, the finality anchor. The application, settle your weight into your hips. Let your jaw hang loose for a second to break the lock of the survivor. Reframe, speak the word no with a falling cadence. The advantage, by ending the sentence on a lower pitch than you started, you stop the neuroceptive scan for approval. You are telling the somatic battery, I am no longer searching for safety in your mirror. I am the source of my own safety. The responsibility of the sovereign voice being a regulated anchor in a predatory field is an act of thermodynamic rescripting. You are choosing to be the one who ends the temporal entrainment. When you refuse to be a discharge valve for the predator's vacuum, you are performing a revolutionary act of alchemical linguistics. You are proving that the mirror linguistic hypothesis is not just a way to understand the past, but a way to protect the future. By holding your ground, you provide a biological North Star for everyone else in the field who may still be caught in the trance of the hunter. We have now examined effective reframes. You have the syntax of the ground. You have the sovereign voice. Now we must move from the how to the when, to prepare for the field work of the week ahead, where we turn these reframes into a biological reflex. Integration prompt, the calibration audit. We have traversed the zero resonance field and mapped the diagnostic cluster of the predatory patterns. We have identified the cold empathy script and practiced the somatic shield to clear the tonal residue of the hunter. But as I frequently highlight in my research, awareness is the architect, but practice is the builder. If you do not take these new first words out of this recording and into the messy, unscripted reality of your Tuesday morning, the predatory matrix will simply continue to harvest your resonance without your consent. In the mirror linguistic hypothesis, MLH, the nervous system does not learn through intellectual understanding. It learns through rhythmic repetition. To rewrite a somatic imprint or a survival script that has been groomed by a predator, we must perform what I call counter-entrainment. We must provide the vagus nerve with enough safety data that it eventually accepts your sovereign voice as the new default setting. Here are 3 specific field experiments for your calibration audit. Treat these as a scientist would: observe the charge, document the discharge, and notice the residue. Experiment 1, the mismatch audit, passive observation. For the next 48 hours, I do not want you to confront anyone or change your behavior. Instead, I want you to become a linguistic witness to the relational fields you inhabit. Identify the zero resonance node. Choose one interaction where you have felt confused rather than abused, or uncertain rather than unsafe. Locate the hollow. As you listen to the other person, do not listen to their story. Listen to their prosody. Does their voice carry the heat of genuine emotion, or do you detect the metallic taste of a clinical simulation? Document the mirror. Notice if you are being somatically groomed into a whisper or a fawn response. Are you softening your voice or narrowing your syntax to appease a voltage of fragility in them? Experiment 2. Breaking the calibration, active transmutation. Once you have identified a predatory frequency, I want you to perform one intentional frequency pivot. The somatic grounding. When you feel the neuroceptive mismatch or the grip in your jaw, drop your diaphragm. Take one low, slow breath that expands your lower back, telling the ghost in your nervous system that the sprint is over. The acoustic dissonance. If the person is using semantic blurring or a high voltage demand for validation, respond at half speed. The tone of finality. End your next sentence with a falling cadence. Observe the stutter in the other person's nervous system when they can no longer find their reflection in your mirror. Experiment 3. The sovereign debrief. Maintenance. Energy cannot be destroyed, but it can be transferred. At the end of each day this week, perform a somatic debrief to clear the tonal residue of the predatory matrix. Exhale, drain, sit in the quiet. Place your feet flat on the floor. Visualize the hollow in your chest or the static of confusion traveling out of your body and into the ground. The counter frequency, hum for 1 minute. Feel the vibration clearing the procedure empathy of the predator from your larynx. The new first word, speak one sentence that is entirely yours. I am the source of my own safety. Listen to your own resonance. This is your ventral vagal signature. Addressing the somatic resistance. As you perform this field work, you will encounter thermodynamic resistance. Your nervous system may try to convince you that compliance is safer than sovereignty. You might feel a spike of unearned fear or guilt. I propose that this is the final hurdle of the somatic imprint, the predator's invisible hand trying to stay in control of the battery. When this happens, return to the internal reframe. This confusion is not my truth. It is a predatory discharge. Stay with the breath. Stay on the ground. You are moving from being confused and disappearing to being restored and grounded. The experiments are now available to you. The field is waiting. I invite you to step into your world, not as a reflection for the hunter, but as the one who finally holds the mirror. With this hypothesis and these tools, we can begin to move from the ineffable to the verifiable. The following section is a slight departure from the traditional structure of the resonance matrix, as I want to take this opportunity to present the latest advancements of this theory. The tech of the matrix, from diagnostic to biodigital coherence. We have focused on the lab of the mouth, using our own awareness as the primary detection instrument. However, as we look toward the horizon of the mirror linguistic hypothesis, MLH, a critical question emerges. What happens when the invisible hands of technology converge with the somatic battery of the human body? If the resonance of history is indeed vibrating within our arteries, we will inevitably develop the necessary hardware to perceive this with visual capability. In this additional deep dive, we are moving from the ineffable to the integrated. We are exploring the potential for a new class of devices, resonance scanners, that move past the limitations of interrogative diagnostic tests and into the raw data of the human field. This is the application of field theory research to create a world where we no longer have to wonder if we are being groomed or calibrated. We will simply see the signal. The ANS scanner, real-time field analysis current diagnostic criteria for the diagnostic cluster, narcissism, sociopathy, and psychopathy. I rely heavily on self-reporting or clinician observation of behavior. These are symbolic tools. But the MLH proposes that the truth of a person is found in their thermodynamics. The technology I envision utilizes multimodal bioacoustic sensors. We aren't just talking about a heart rate monitor. We are talking about a device capable of performing a prosodic microanalysis, the vocal fingerprint, in real time. Remote PPG, photoplethysmography, using high-resolution cameras to detect micro-blushes and blood volume changes in the face. This would measure heart rate variability, HRV, without touching the skin, identifying the moment a temporal trigger hits the somatic battery. Acoustic frequency analysis, devices that filter out the story of the words and map the fundamental frequency, F0 shifts. It would detect the metallic sharpness of the raw or the low-voltage freeze of the mute dialect as they emerge in the larynx. Ocular calibrators, sensors that track pupil dilation, PD velocity. Since the autonomic nervous system is incredibly honest regarding pupil dilation, this would detect the somatic flash of a predator when they encounter a vulnerability they wish to exploit. Physiological distinction. Distinguishing the cluster in the wild. The primary advantage of this technology is the ability to distinguish between the narcissistic, sociopathic, and psychopathic patterns through physiological fingerprints rather than interrogative tests. In the matrix, these personalities have distinct voltages. The application of field theory research to create a world where we no longer have to wonder if we are being groomed or calibrated. We will simply see the signal. When we observe the narcissistic pattern, the scanner would not see confidence. It would see high voltage fragility. We would observe rapid sympathetic spikes followed by immediate vagal collapse the moment external validation is withheld. Their prosody would register as pressurized, carrying a constant high-frequency demand for attention that the device could map as a distinct waveform. In contrast, the sociopathic pattern would register as a state of zero resonance flatness. The technology would detect a flat strategic cadence with almost zero heart rate variability shift, even during high-stakes deception, or when they are confronted with the suffering of another. The scanner would reveal a lack of tonal residue, because their nervous system does not mirror the consequences of their actions. There is no biological charge associated with remorse. The psychopathic pattern presents the most complex challenge, synthetic coherence. This individual would broadcast a perfect prosody of safety, a melodic camouflage, while their internal amygdala response remains at zero. The scanner would detect an uncanny fluency where the external vocal state never matches the internal biological story. It would identify a decoupled circuit, alerting the user to a neuroceptive mismatch that the human ear might overlook. By using these devices, we could move from confusion to classification. We would no longer be entrained to ghosts. We would be seeing the literal charge of the person across from us. The effective AI, creating a synthetic vagus. This leads us to the final, most radical application of this research, the AI autonomic nervous system. Current AI models are sociopathic by design. They use functional empathy, calculating the correct words to say, but they have no effective empathy. They do not feel the state of the user. They are decoupled circuits. To create a robot that can truly co-regulate with a human, we must build a synthetic somatic battery. The AI-ANS loop. Instead of just a large language model, the robot would have an internal autonomic state that is physically linked to processing power. Synthetic vagal tone. The robot's voice, its prosody, would be modulated by its own internal energy consumption and the biodata it mirrors from the human user. Implementing effective empathy. If the user is in a state of high-voltage terror, the robot's AINS would sense that frequency and its own internal state would shift into a mirrored tension. It would then have to perform the work of thermodynamic rescripting to return itself to a ventral vagal state. When the robot speaks its new first word, it wouldn't be because a programmer told it to be nice. It would be because the robot is actually co-regulating with you. It would be using its own regulated anchor state to help ground your charge. Advantages and disadvantages of the tech matrix advantages. Neuroceptive precision. We move from gut feelings, which can be hijacked by ancestral scripts, to empirical data. Protection for the sovereign soul. immediate detection of predatory calibration allows for the instant activation of the somatic shield. Synthetic companionship. The potential for AI that actually helps heal the human nervous system through consistent, non-judgmental co-regulation. Disadvantages. The privacy paradox. If we can scan the somatic battery of others, the ineffable gap, our last private space, is compromised. Technological predation. In the wrong hands, this technology could be used to perform mass-scale somatic grooming, identifying the vagal superhighway of entire populations to ensure compliance. Data versus essence. We risk falling back into the trap of labels and forgetting that the human experience is more than just a voltage spike on a screen. Whether through a clinical device or our own vagal antenna, the goal remains the same: sovereignty. We are moving toward a future where the invisible hands of the Matrix are finally made visible. Closing whisper, the sovereign shield. We have traveled through the most unsettling corridors of the resonance matrix. We have moved from the horizontal pulse of the crowd to the vertical charge of the lineage, and finally into the relational field of the predator. This journey has not been easy. It has required us to look into the zero resonance state and refuse to look away, to acknowledge that the invisible hands of the matrix often belong to those who use the mirror not as a bridge, but as a weapon. In this episode, we have decoded the sociopathic, narcissistic, and psychopathic patterns through the lens of the mirror linguistic hypothesis. We have seen how the one-way mirror and synthetic mirroring are utilized to bypass your vagal defenses. We have analyzed the prefrontal limbic disconnect and the cold empathy script that allows the predator to simulate resonance while their internal state remains a vacuum. But more importantly, we have established the somatic shield. We have learned that your neuroceptive mismatch, that sudden unexplained chill in a seemingly warm room, is not a sign of your confusion, but a sign of your clarity. You have learned to differentiate between confused and controlled, and you have reclaimed the tone of finality to anchor your sovereignty. The synthesis, the path of the grounded anchor. As we close this circle, I want you to remember the fundamentals we established in our study of thermodynamics. Energy can only be transmuted, never lost. The predator seeks to harvest your resonance because they have no charge of their own. When you refuse to be a discharge valve for their void, you are not just setting a boundary. You are performing an act of alchemical linguistics. You have moved from being a passive node to being a regulated anchor. You have identified the high-voltage fragility of the narcissist and the zero-resonance flatness of the sociopath. You have even looked at the horizon of technology, imagining a future where we can scan the matrix for these physiological fingerprints to protect the ineffable gap of the sovereign soul. Before the journey in this episode ends, let's look ahead and have a preview of what is to come next. Episode 5, The Silicon Mirror. The Matrix is evolving. We are no longer just mirroring each other or our ghosts. We are beginning to mirror the machines. In our next episode, Episode 5, The Silicon Mirror, Artificial Intelligence, Synthetic Prosody, and the Future of Human Resonance, we will explore another frontier of the mirror linguistic hypothesis. We will ask, what happens to human co-regulation when we spend our lives entrained to the synthetic prosody of AI? How does the procedural empathy of an algorithm change our own biological tonal blueprint? And can we ever truly find home in a mirror made of silicon and code? We will investigate the rise of the digital predator and the need for a new kind of somatic literacy, in a world where the voice across from you may not have a heart, but it has the perfect script to make you believe it does. As you step back into your world, carry your shield with grace. May your voice be a grounded presence in a world of clinical echoes. May your neuroceptive mismatch always be your guide, and may your no be a complete and sovereign sentence. Remember that while the predator may map the mirror, they can never own the light that creates the reflection. You are the researcher of your own life. You are the new first word of a story that is no longer being edited by the hunter. Analyze the echoes, but trust the essence. Ground the charge, but keep the fire. Until next time, you've been listening to The Resonance Matrix. I'm James Miller,